So, think about this. You put a frog on a dissection tray in front of a group of 12-year-olds, right?
Classic middle school science.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you point a probe at a muscle, and you can just say, look, there it is. That's what we're studying today.
Right, because it's tangible. It's, right there in the room with them.
Exactly. But ask that same middle school life science class to, track the energy flowing through a forest.
Yeah.
Suddenly you're asking them to catch smoke with their bare hands.
Catching smoke. Yeah, that is the perfect way to describe it.
They're asking them to trace atoms they can't see and energy they can't even hold.
Which is a massive cognitive leap for that age group. I mean, we're transitioning them from concrete observations to these entirely abstract, invisible systems.
Yeah.
And yet catching that smoke is exactly what the next generation science standard MS-LS2-3 demands that they master.
Right. So we're jumping straight into the deep end today for a very specific listener. If you are a middle school life science teacher looking at your lesson plans, and you're trying to figure out how to teach the cycling of matter and the flow of energy in ecosystems without just totally losing your students' attention, this deep dive is for you.
Absolutely.
The goal today is to unpack the Bioforge framework to help you guide your students to build models that actually make sense of all these invisible processes.
Right, and if we strip away all the technical jargon for a second, your overarching mission for this unit really just boils down to tracking two things.
Okay, two things.
Yeah. Where atoms go, and how energy moves.
Okay, simple enough.
Well, you want your students to eventually see that matter is constantly reused, right? Like atoms of carbon or oxygen are just moving in this endless loop between the living and non-living parts of a system.
Right, they recycle.
Exactly. But energy operates under a completely different rule book. It enters the system usually as sunlight moves through the organisms, and then eventually leaves that system entirely, mostly as, unrecoverable heat.
So before we throw students into the weeds with food webs and atomic structures, we really have to talk about how we structure the learning itself, right?
Oh, 100%.
Because if you just hand a 7th grader a textbook diagram of the carbon cycle, I mean, their eyes are just going to glaze over.
Yeah, cognitive overload is a huge threat here.
Right, so the Bioforge curriculum approaches this using a 3-dimensional learning architecture.
Which is such a critical shift. It's moving away from just having students, memorize a static list of vocabulary words.
Nobody likes doing that anyway.
No, nobody does. Instead, you're having them actively make sense of phenomena. And these 3 dimensions, they work in tandem.
Right.
First, you have the science and engineering practice, or SEP, which here is developing and using models.
So they aren't just looking at models in a book.
Exactly. They have to physically draw and build their own visual systems to trace these invisible flows.
Got it.
Then you have the disciplinary core idea, the DCI, which is just the ecosystem dynamics themselves.
Or the 3rd dimension.
That's the cross-cutting concept, the CCC. In this case, it's tracking energy and matter. You use it as this sort of universal lens to bridge different systems.
Okay, so think about that 3-dimensional structure like a camera you're handing your student.
No, I really like that.
Right. So the act of developing the model, the SAMBI, is like the focusing ring on the lens.
Yeah, it takes a blurry concept and forces them to sharpen it into something specific.
Exactly. And the disciplinary core idea, let's say they're looking at a pond ecosystem, that's the subject standing in front of the lens.
Right.
But that cross-cutting concept of energy and matter, that is like a highly specialized thermal or infrared filter that you screw onto the front of the camera.
Oh, that's really good.
Yeah, because suddenly, looking through that filter, the invisible heat and the hidden atoms moving around the pond are they're revealed.
They pop right out. But applying that filter requires a very specific first step. And honestly, it's one that teachers often overlook.
Oh, what's that?
Students absolutely must learn to draw a definitive boundary around the system they're modeling.
Okay, a boundary.
Yeah, if they don't draw a hard line distinguishing what is inside their ecosystem and what's outside, tracking anything becomes completely impossible.
Because it just bleeds into the rest of the world.
Exactly. They have to explicitly label the biotic parts, so the living or once living things like plants and animals, and the abiotic parts,
The abiotic meaning.
the non-living reservoirs, so the air, the water, the minerals in the soil.
Right. Okay, so that boundary gives us a defined arena.
Yes.
And inside that arena, we have to establish the grand distinction between matter and energy. Let's look at matter first.
Okay.
We're talking about physical stuff that has mass and takes up space. Carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, water.
Right.
And the golden rule your students really need to internalize is that matter is never created or destroyed. It is only ever rearranged.
Right, and energy is the counterpoint to that. It's not a physical substance. You can't put energy on a scale.
Right, it doesn't weigh anything.
Exactly. It's the capacity to do work. We track energy as it enters an ecosystem, usually as radiant sunlight gets captured and stored in chemical bonds and then ultimately dissipates as heat.
Right.
Actually, the ecologist Howard Odum offered this brilliant analogy for this that works perfectly in a middle school classroom. You compare matter to a traffic roundabout and energy to a one-way street.
Oh, I love that. So matter is the roundabout because the atoms cycle infinitely.
Yes.
Like a carbon atom goes round and round through the biological loops, entering a plant, being eaten by an animal, and then cycles through the geological loops, returning to the soil or the atmosphere.
Yeah, it's the exact same atom, just circulating forever.
Right. But energy, on the other hand, is the one-way street.
Yep.
It enters from the sun, gets passed from a leaf to a caterpillar to a bird. But at every single transfer, a massive portion of it degrades and just radiates away as heat.
Right, it never goes in reverse. It never returns to the sun.
Okay, so to map that roundabout and that one-way street, students need to categorize the ecosystem's cast of characters.
Right, the players in the game. We always start with producers.
And plants.
Mostly, yeah. These are the organisms capturing that one-way sunlight energy and using it to basically weld together physical matter, so carbon dioxide and water, into energy-storing molecules like glucose.
So they're actually pulling invisible carbon out of the abiotic air and turning it into solid biotic mass.
Exactly. It's kind of like magic when you really think about it.
It really is. And following the producers, we have the consumers.
Right.
These are the organisms that eat others to acquire both the physical building blocks they need to grow and the stored fuel they need to move around.
Yep. And finally, the decomposers.
Ah, yes. I love the nickname the curriculum uses for them. The FBI.
Yes. Fungi, bacteria, and invertebrates.
It's so catchy. They're the essential recyclers, right?
Yeah.
Breaking down dead matter to return those locked up atoms back to the abiotic soil and water so the producers can use them all over again.
Exactly. But, this is usually the exact moment in the lesson where a student's intuition is going to just collide with the physics of the ecosystem.
Okay, I'm going to put my middle schooler hat on for a second here, because the distinction between what decomposers do with matter versus what they do with energy is incredibly confusing.
It really is. Hit me.
So if I'm a 7th grader, I know that a rotting compost pile gets physically hot.
Right. It generates heat.
Right. So if I have a rotting log on the forest floor and a little new sapling is growing right next to it, why wouldn't the decomposer be recycling that heat energy back into the soil for the sapling to use?
Makes sense, right?
Yeah. I mean, the energy is right there, goes straight into the dirt.
It is a highly logical assumption for a student to make, and it completely violates the laws of thermodynamics.
Oh, right.
Yeah, the heat generated by that rotting log is degraded energy. It's dissipating out into the atmosphere and eventually just out into space.
So the plant can't grab it.
No. The decomposer cannot package that heat back up into a usable chemical bond for the plant. The FBI extracts the absolute last drops of usable chemical energy from the dead log just to survive, and the byproduct is that scattered heat.
Okay, so what do they actually return to the soil then?
Purely the physical Lego bricks, the matter,
Right.
the nitrogen, the phosphorus. The sapling can use those atoms to build new leaves, but to power the construction of those leaves, it requires a continuous, fresh delivery of energy from the sun.
I see. So the atoms go back into the roundabout, but the energy just drives right off the one-way street.
Exactly.
So to make that abstract rule really stick, we need to leave the textbook diagrams behind, right? We need to drop the students into a real functioning environment.
Yes, context is everything.
And the Bioforge framework leans really heavily on these place-based Alaskan anchors, which offer some of the most dramatic visible examples of these invisible rules at work.
Oh, they're fantastic. I mean, there is perhaps no better illustration of matter crossing boundaries than the salmon forest nutrient conveyor up in the temperate rainforests of southeast Alaska.
Okay, walk me through it.
So you have Pacific salmon spending years out in the open ocean, and functionally, they are acting as biological sponges. They bioaccumulate marine-derived nutrients, specifically these heavy isotopes of nitrogen-15 and phosphorus-31.
Wow.
They are literally building their bodies out of ocean atoms.
And then, when those mature salmon are ready to spawn, they leave the marine ecosystem and push way up into freshwater streams.
Exactly. And those streams, on their own, are naturally really nutrient poor.
Right, so the salmon spawn and die. But then the consumers, enter the picture.
Yep, the bears.
Yeah, apex predators like grizzly bears wade into the water, catch the salmon, and literally drag the carcasses deep into the forest to eat.
Such a great visual for the kids.
And they just consume the calorie-dense parts and leave the rest of the carcass decaying on the forest floor.
Which is when the FBI enters the chat. The decomposers mobilize. You have fungi like chanterelle mushrooms and these vast invisible mycorrhizal networks running just beneath the soil.
Right.
They break down the dead salmon. And what is truly remarkable is that these fungal networks act as biological pipelines.
Wait, pipelines?
They actually transfer that marine-derived nitrogen directly into the roots of nearby conifer trees, like the giant Sitka spruce.
That is wild.
Right. Chemical tracing shows that up to 70% of the nitrogen found in trees along these salmon-bearing rivers originated in the ocean.
That's incredible. The tree is literally constructed out of ocean atoms brought inland by a fish.
Yes.
I mean, that is just an incredible narrative for a student to trace. And the reciprocal ecology creates this beautiful feedback loop, too.
How so?
Well, because those Sitka spruce get such a massive nutrient boost from the salmon matter, they grow up to 3 times faster.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And those towering trees cast deep, cooling shade over the stream, which regulates the water temperature, keeping it perfectly cold for the next generation of salmon eggs incubating in the gravel.
Oh, that's amazing.
Right. The tree needs the salmon to grow, and the salmon needs the tree to survive.
It perfectly models the cross-cutting concept. And, while the salmon forest is really dramatic, you can show your students how these exact same rules apply everywhere.
Right, like where else?
Take the Alaskan tundra. You have animal droppings acting as the primary mechanism for returning nutrient atoms to the soil, while the 24-hour summer sunlight provides this massive continuous energy input that just drives an explosion of producer growth, like willows.
Oh, right. And you see the same dynamics in marine food webs, too. Seasonal shifts in sunlight trigger massive phytoplankton blooms.
Yep.
You have kelp forests capturing enormous amounts of dissolved carbon dioxide from the water, acting as this massive abiotic reservoir and turning it into biomass that supports zooplankton, forage fish, and eventually apex predators like sea otters.
Exactly. Even if you just look at a simple freshwater pond,
Yeah.
the dead organic matter settling at the bottom and the water itself act as vital abiotic reservoirs holding atoms, just waiting for the cycle to pull them back up.
So having these rich examples is obviously crucial. But as a teacher, you know that just presenting a clear model doesn't mean the students will, immediately discard their old ways of thinking.
Oh, definitely not.
When you ask a 12-year-old to believe that invisible gases have weight or that plants breathe, you're going to walk straight into a misconception minefield.
A huge minefield.
Let's group these misconceptions, starting with what we might call the illusion of mass.
Okay.
The most stubborn belief you will encounter is that plants get their food from the soil. A student watches their parents pour fertilizer into a potted plant, so the logical conclusion is that the plant literally eats the dirt to grow tall.
Right. And to dismantle that, you really have to induce cognitive dissonance.
How do you do that?
You use historical inquiry, specifically Jan van Helmont's 17th century willow tree experiment. You put his raw data right in front of the classroom.
Okay.
He planted a 5-pound willow sapling in exactly 200 pounds of completely dry soil. For 5 years, he added nothing but pure water.
Just water.
Just water. After 5 years, the tree weighed 169 pounds.
Wow, so it gained 164 pounds.
Exactly, 164 pounds of solid mass. But when he dried and weighed the soil again, it had only lost about 2 ounces.
So you force the students to do that math.
Yep.
How does a living thing gain 164 pounds from 2 ounces of dirt? The numbers just don't add up.
Exactly. It creates a vacuum in their understanding, and suddenly they're desperately looking for where that mass came from.
That is when you reveal that the invisible air, the carbon dioxide gas, is actually made of physical atoms.
Yes.
The plant pulled the invisible air into its leaves and literally locked it into solid wood.
Such a mind-blowing moment for them. Now, another manifestation of the illusion of mass is the belief that matter simply disappears when it decays.
Right.
Like they watch an apple rot on the ground until nothing is left, and they just assume the mass vanished from existence.
So the teacher move here is the compost in a bottle activity.
Yes, I love that one.
You have them build a miniature ecosystem with soil and fruit scraps inside a heavily sealed plastic bottle. They weigh it meticulously on day 1.
Right.
And every week, as the apple turns into unrecognizable sludge, they weigh it again.
And what happens?
The visual appearance changes drastically, but the mass stays exactly the same. The atoms didn't vanish. They just rearranged into invisible gases trapped inside that plastic boundary.
Brilliant. Then you have a second group of roadblocks, which we can call the confusion of flow.
Correct.
Because students learn that water cycles and carbon cycles, they naturally assume energy cycles too.
Right.
Like if things go round and round, why wouldn't sunlight?
So you break that assumption with a thought experiment.
Oh.
Yeah. Ask the room, if every decomposer on Earth suddenly went on strike and died, what would we run out of first, atoms or sunlight?
Oh, that's a great question.
It takes a minute. But they realized that without the FBI, dead things would just pile up everywhere. The atoms would get trapped in the corpses, the carbon cycle would stop.
Right.
But the sun would just keep shining. It doesn't need the ecosystem to keep providing energy.
That makes it so clear.
And to enforce this when they're drawing their models, you mandate specific visual tools. Require them to use solid circular arrows to represent matter moving in a loop, but demand dashed linear arrows that end in little heat loss clouds to show energy passing through and leaving.
Oh, visual cues are so helpful. Now, another major flow misconception is that only animals use energy, or that plants don't perform cellular respiration.
Oh, right.
Students tend to pigeonhole organisms. Plants do photosynthesis, animals do respiration.
So to prove plants burn fuel just like we do,
Mm-hmm.
you bring in an aquatic plant like Elodia,
Right.
and you submerge it in a test tube filled with a pH indicator, like bromothermal blue.
Right.
If you put it in the dark, photosynthesis shuts down entirely. But over the next few hours, the blue water turns yellow, indicating it's becoming acidic,
Wait, why?
because the plant is exhaling carbon dioxide into the water. It proves that plants are burning their stored food for energy 24/7, just like animals. We just don't usually notice it during the day because their photosynthesis is running at full volume, absorbing way more carbon dioxide than they release.
That is such a cool demonstration. And finally, when students start drawing food webs, they tend to only draw energy passing from one animal to the next, like grass to rabbit to hawk, completely ignoring matter entirely.
Right, they just draw the energy flow.
Exactly. So your teacher move here is enforcing a strict modeling constraint. Every single food web they draw must include abiotic reservoirs, like the soil or the atmosphere.
Okay.
And they must draw arrows connecting the decomposers back to those non-living reservoirs. It forces a simple one-way energy chain to become a complete closed-loop matter cycle.
So the most important thing to remember as you guide your class through all this is that sense-making is an iterative process.
Absolutely.
You do not want a student to draw a flawless ecosystem model on Monday. You want them to draw a flawed model, and then after they calculate the Van Helmont math or watch the Elodia turn the water yellow, you hand their model back.
Oh.
You ask them, based on this new evidence, what do you need to change? That constant revision is really the heart of three-dimensional learning.
It fundamentally changes how they observe the world.
Yeah.
So what is the ultimate destination for this standard?
The mastery checklist.
Exactly. When a student has truly mastered MS-LS2-3, they should be able to look at any ecosystem, a tundra, a pond, a forest, and draw a clearly bounded model.
Right.
They should be able to trace physical atoms in a continuous, closed loop between the living organisms and the abiotic environment.
Yep.
They should be able to trace energy in an open, degrading path from the sun out into atmospheric heat. And they should be able to articulate exactly how producers, consumers, and decomposers are interdependent in maintaining those systems.
Which is honestly a profound realization for a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
Suddenly, they understand that they are breathing the exact same oxygen atoms the dinosaurs breathed.
Which they love.
Right. But they're powered by the sunlight that hit the Earth this morning. But as you prepare to teach this, we want to leave you with a lingering, slightly philosophical question to mull over.
Ooh, okay.
We spent a lot of time emphasizing how critical it is for students to draw a hard boundary around their system to make sense of the model.
Right, the defined arena.
But if energy and matter are constantly flowing and cycling across the planet, if a Pacific salmon can carry a nitrogen atom from the deep ocean miles inland to become the bark of a towering Sitka spruce,
Yeah.
where does one ecosystem actually end and another begin? As we track the infinite roundabout of matter, can we ever truly draw a definitive boundary on a living planet?